Linda had always prided herself on being independent. Even after retirement, she handled her own grocery shopping, paid her bills on time, and managed her finances with quiet precision. Her life wasn't extravagant, but it was stable, organized down to the last detail. But after a mild stroke last spring, something changed. Not in her body. Her hands still worked, her legs still carried her. But in her mind. Not all at once, but gradually, like fog creeping over a window. She started forgetting names mid-sentence. She'd open the fridge and forget what she needed. One morning, she put her keys in the oven and nearly turned it on. That's when she knew something wasn't right. Her son, Paul, noticed too. He came by more often after that, checking in. At first, it felt sweet. He brought her soup, made her tea, and asked if she was feeling okay. He offered to help with her medication schedule. When she couldn't remember her online banking password, he gently said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of it for now." Linda had always trusted Paul. After all, she raised him alone. His father had left when he was 5, and she had worked double shifts as a waitress just to keep food on the table. She never asked for much in return. Just love. Just respect. So when Paul said, "Let me help manage your bills while you recover," she agreed. It made sense. Her mind wasn't what it used to be. And Paul, her only son, surely had her best interests at heart. But little by little, that help began to feel like control. Paul started organizing everything, her emails, her appointments, her passwords. He changed her laptop login for security. He started collecting her mail before she could read it. If someone called about an account, Paul would say, "She's not well enough to talk right now." Linda would nod, because some part of her believed he was protecting her. But another part, the quiet, alert part of her, started to feel uneasy. One morning, she asked about her investment account. Paul waved it off, smiling. "Mom, let's not worry about money right now, okay? Focus on getting better." Another time, she tried logging into her online banking. The password didn't work. She asked Paul. "I changed it," he said quickly. "Too many phishing scams going around." Then he kissed her forehead and handed her her tea, as if that was the end of the conversation. Linda didn't push. She didn't want to seem ungrateful. But the fog in her mind had started to clear. She was beginning to notice more than she let on. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining outside, soft and steady, and Linda was sitting in her recliner knitting. Her stitches were uneven, but she liked the rhythm. Paul was in the kitchen, talking on the phone. He didn't know she was listening. He spoke in a hushed voice, but not quiet enough. "She barely remembers what day it is," he said, chuckling. "Yeah, the account's under my name now." She signed it without even realizing. Linda's hands froze. The yarn slipped from her fingers. He continued, "Once everything's moved over, we'll finally be able to get that cabin. I mean, it's not like she needs all that space anymore." A pause. Then, "I'm telling you, she won't even notice." Linda stared at the wall in front of her, her breathing slow and quiet. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. But in that moment, the fog in her mind lifted completely. Her memory, once soft and hazy, had returned like a blade, sharp and clear. And now she remembered everything. But she said nothing. When Paul came into the room with her tea, she smiled and thanked him. She let him believe she was still confused. She let him think she was weak. Because now she needed time. Time to find out just how deep the betrayal went, and how far her son was willing to go. She wasn't just his mother anymore. She was his silent witness. And that was far more dangerous than he realized. Linda had always believed that motherhood was built on trust. From the moment she held Paul in her arms, she devoted everything to him. She taught him how to walk, how to read, how to be kind. She scraped and saved for his school books, cooked dinner after 12-hour shifts, and missed her own birthdays so he could have his. So how did they end up here? Her own son, her pride, her only family, was stealing from her while pretending to protect her. And the cruelest part? He thought she was too confused to notice. But he was wrong. Because Linda wasn't lost in fog anymore. Her mind was slowly but surely returning to her. And now she was paying attention. At first, she said nothing. She pretended to forget things again, letting her voice shake just a little when asking questions. Paul always answered the same way, reassuring, with a gentle tone, but never giving her control back. He would sit at her desk, opening her laptop and saying, "Let me just check your emails real quick." Then he'd lean over the screen, typing fast. Linda noticed something. He never let her look too closely. Every time she leaned forward, he'd turn the screen just slightly away. If she asked to read something, he'd say, "It's just junk mail, Mom. Don't stress." She smiled each time and kept watching. A few days later, Paul left for the grocery store. Linda waited exactly 4 minutes after the door closed. Then she went straight to her desk. The laptop was locked. New password. She tried her old one, no luck. Then she opened the drawer. The bank statements were gone. All her old documents missing. Instead, there was a folder with Paul's name on it. Receipts, loan applications, and something else. A printed contract. In it, she saw her name listed as co-signer on a new mortgage. Her heart sank. She didn't remember signing anything like that. Linda wasn't a lawyer, but she wasn't stupid either. Paul was using her name, her identity, and likely her money to secure something she didn't even know about. And he thought she was too far gone to understand. That night, after dinner, Paul sat across from her on the couch. "You know, Mom," he said casually, "if you ever feel overwhelmed by everything, I could help take over the estate stuff. You've done enough, honestly. It's your time to relax." Linda stirred her tea quietly. "Oh, that's very thoughtful," she replied with a smile. "Of course," he continued. "I'd handle everything with care. Just like you would. You trust me, right?" She looked him dead in the eyes and said softly, "Always." He smiled, relieved. But inside, Linda was memorizing every word. Because now she had a plan. The next morning, she made a call from her bedroom, with the door closed and the fan on to drown out sound. "Hi," she said to the woman on the other end. "My name is Linda Weston. I believe someone has changed my banking credentials without my permission. I need to speak with someone who handles account security." The woman asked her to verify her identity. She did. Then she asked about recent transfers. Within 2 minutes, her stomach dropped. There had been multiple large withdrawals from her savings. Some of them marked as property investments. Others marked family transfer. None of them had her approval. Linda asked for printed statements to be mailed to her niece's address. Then she called the lawyer who had helped her write her will 5 years ago. "Linda," the lawyer said, surprised. "It's been a while. I need to update everything," she said calmly. Quietly. And immediately. From that day forward, Linda kept track of everything. Every word Paul said. Every document he left on the table. Every time he opened her laptop when he thought she wasn't watching. She moved silently, like a woman who had nothing but remembered everything. The hardest part? Pretending she didn't know. Pretending to forget his birthday. Pretending to misplace her pill bottle. Pretending to ask the same question twice in the same conversation. Because the longer she played the part, the more careless Paul became. And the more he revealed. One evening, Linda heard him on the phone again. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. It just happened. "I've got access to everything now," he said, laughing. "She thinks I'm just helping. Honestly, I could take half her estate and she'd thank me for it." He chuckled again. "She doesn't even remember who she left the house to. When I get power of attorney, it's all mine anyway." Linda sat at the top of the stairs, invisible. She held her breath. And she realized something chilling. He wasn't just being greedy. He was planning for her to fade away, to disappear quietly, so he could take everything. But Linda had no intention of disappearing. Not anymore. That night, she wrote one sentence in her journal. He forgot that memory is a quiet weapon. And in that moment, she wasn't scared. She was ready. Ready to confront the boy she had once raised to be honest. The son she'd given everything to. The man who now saw her as a burden instead of a blessing. But not yet. Not until she had every piece in place. Because the final move? That had to be hers. Linda had waited long enough. She had gathered the proof. She had heard the calls. She had watched her only son, Paul, the boy she had fed from her hands, walked to school, and cheered from the sidelines, treat her like a fading shadow in her own home. But she wasn't disappearing. She wasn't broken. She was aware. And now she was ready. That morning began like any other. Paul walked in holding 2 coffees. "Morning, Mom," he said brightly. "I got your favorite." Linda smiled, soft and sweet. "Hazelnut, right? You remembered," he laughed. She nodded, sipping slowly. He sat across from her, tapping at his phone. Linda watched him, pretending to admire the flowers on the kitchen windowsill. She'd always been good at watching, especially when people thought she wasn't paying attention. He didn't notice that her laptop was no longer in the living room. He didn't realize her bank statements had stopped coming to the house. He hadn't asked why her lawyer had been calling more frequently. Because Paul had stopped seeing her as a person. And that was his mistake. After breakfast, Linda waited until Paul stepped out to take a call. She walked into her bedroom, locked the door, and pulled out a folder from under her nightstand. Inside were copies of the forged co-signature for a second mortgage, transfer records from her retirement fund to Paul's new investment account, screenshots of emails he sent under her name, a notarized statement from the bank rep she had met privately last week. It was more than enough. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need revenge. She just needed to remind Paul that she remembered, and that she had never stopped being his mother, the woman who once kept their lights on with one paycheck and 2 jobs. That night she cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just tomato soup and grilled cheese, his childhood favorite. Paul sat at the table, scrolling again. He barely looked up as she poured his soup. "Thanks, Mom. Smells good." She sat down slowly across from him. "Paul," she said softly, "I need to talk to you about something." He glanced up. "Everything okay?" She smiled. "It is now." Then she leaned forward and said it, clear, steady, calm. "I remember what you did with my account." Paul's spoon froze halfway to his mouth. "What?" Her eyes never blinked. "I remember the transfers. The signatures. The call you made from the kitchen about the cabin. I remember the statement marked family transfer." Paul stared at her, pale. "Mom, you must be." She raised her hand gently. "No, I'm not confused. Not anymore." The room went silent. Paul's face slowly shifted from surprise to discomfort. "Look, I can explain." She pulled the folder from the drawer beside her. He froze. She slid it across the table. "You don't need to explain, Paul. I already know." He opened the folder with shaking hands. As he flipped through the pages, his lips parted slightly, but no words came. "I was sick," Linda said. "I trusted you. I let you help because I believed you were doing it out of love. But you weren't. You were planning to take everything." Paul dropped the folder and leaned back, his face pale. "I didn't take everything," he muttered. "I just moved some things around. I was going to tell you." "No," Linda said calmly. "You were going to wait until I forgot everything." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden she used to tend daily. "When you were 10, she said softly, you broke the neighbor's window with a baseball. You ran home, crying, thinking they'd call the police. I walked you back to their house and made you apologize. I told you, when you do something wrong, you face it. You don't hide. Do you remember that?" Paul said nothing. She turned around. "Well, I do." Paul's voice cracked. "Are you going to report me?" Linda sighed. "I already spoke to my lawyer. Legally, I have grounds to press charges. But I'm not going to." He looked up, surprised. She continued, "Because that would hurt me more than it would hurt you. What I'm going to do instead is take back control of my life." Paul blinked. "You will no longer have access to my accounts. I've updated my documents. And I've removed you as financial power of attorney. You'll also be returning every cent, or I will let the authorities handle it." Her voice was calm, but there was steel in it. Paul slumped forward. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I thought you wouldn't need it." Linda nodded. "That's what scares me." She walked back to the table, took her seat, and sipped her soup. Paul sat in silence. For the first time, he realized the weight of what he had done. And for the first time in months, Linda felt like herself again. Not because she had regained control of her money, but because she had remembered who she was. A woman who raised a son by herself. A woman who gave and gave and gave, and still had something left. A woman who had been underestimated, and used that silence to gather strength. After dinner, Paul offered to wash the dishes. Linda let him. She didn't say much. There was nothing left to say. Because now Paul understood something he never had before. His mother didn't need to shout to be heard. She just needed to remember. Linda didn't sleep much that night. Not because she was anxious, but because her mind was clear for the first time in weeks. She stood by the window at 2 a.m., watching the quiet neighborhood sleep. The porch light cast a soft glow on the garden she used to care for. She thought of the boy who once ran through it barefoot, chasing fireflies with a jar in his hand. That boy had become a man who tried to take everything from her. But even now, Linda didn't hate Paul. She just saw him clearly. And that clarity changed everything. By morning, she had made her decision. She called her lawyer again. Calm. Firm. "I want to finalize everything. Today, if possible." The lawyer agreed. Documents were prepared. Accounts were locked. Access codes updated. Beneficiaries changed. Linda signed it all with steady hands. Then she took one more step. She called a locksmith. When Paul returned that afternoon, he juggled a coffee and a bag of groceries, his keys in hand. But the lock wouldn't turn. He jiggled it, confused, then knocked loudly. Linda opened the door slowly. "I had the locks changed," she said quietly. He stared at her. "What?" "I needed to make sure the home I paid for, every brick, every tile, was safe again. From now on, you don't come in without asking." "Mom," Paul laughed nervously. "You don't mean that." She didn't laugh. "I do." Paul stepped back. "So this is how it's going to be now?" "No," Linda replied. "This is how it has to be." Paul didn't yell. He didn't argue. Because the folder she handed him earlier still sat in his car, undeniable proof that he had been caught. And he knew deep down, she could have destroyed him if she wanted to. But she didn't. That somehow made it worse. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked. Linda looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You have friends. You have a job. You'll figure it out. The same way I figured everything out when your father left, and you were 5, and I had nothing." Paul's eyes dropped to the floor. She added, "This house will always be a home to you, but it's no longer your playground." That night, Linda did something she hadn't done in years. She invited her niece and her niece's children over for dinner. They cooked together, laughed loudly in the kitchen, and played board games in the living room. Her niece's youngest daughter curled up next to her on the couch and said, "You tell the best stories, Auntie Linda." Linda smiled. She hadn't felt this scene in years. Not just like a mother, not just like a bank account, but like a person with wisdom and joy and a presence that mattered. A few days later, she received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from Paul. "Mom, I've spent days trying to find the right words. But maybe the truth is, there are no right words for what I did. I took your trust and treated it like a tool. I acted like your love was something I was owed forever. But I see now that love is not owed. It's earned. And I stopped earning it the day I saw you as someone to use, not someone to honor. You didn't scream at me. You didn't curse. You simply showed me who you were, and who I had become. I've never felt more ashamed and more grateful. Because you still gave me the chance to walk away with dignity. I want to earn my way back. Not into your house. Into your heart. Even if it takes years." Linda folded the letter and placed it in her drawer. Not because she forgave everything, but because she understood something bigger than pain. Forgiveness isn't weakness. And silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing. And still be heard. Linda didn't call him back. Not yet. She wasn't being cruel. She was letting him sit with it. Because now she had nothing to prove. Her love had always been quiet. But now her boundaries would be louder than words. From that day on, Linda lived lighter. She went back to baking. She started a little reading group with neighbors her age. She visited the library on Wednesdays and helped little ones sound out big words. And every once in a while, she'd walk past the corner where her computer used to sit, the one Paul once controlled, and she'd smile. Not because she had won, but because she had remembered who she was. A woman with memory sharp as a knife. A heart that gave without limits. And finally, a voice that didn't need volume to shake the room. Because in the end, the silence she gave him, it spoke louder than anything she could have said. And it told the truth. You underestimated the wrong woman.